At 1947 local time, the sky above the southern Red Sea is the specific dark of a sky that has been dark for 2 hours and intends to stay that way. There is no ambient light below. The Yemeni coast to the west is present as a blacked-out mass against a blacked-out horizon. No city lights, because the cities that might have produced them have been without reliable power for a decade. And the specific darkness of a coastline that has been at war for 10 years is different from the darkness of a coastline that has merely had its lights turned off for the night. It is the darkness of absence, which is its own kind of information. Above that absence, at 31,000 feet, 2 aircraft from Carrier Air Wing 7 are making 620 knots on a heading that is not, by anyone's current measurement, toward anything that looks like a target. It will be. The lead aircraft is an EA-18G Growler, bureau number withheld in the operational manifest for the standard reasons. The EA-18G is, in the vocabulary of naval aviation, a specialist, a 2-seat FA-18F airframe modified from its birth to carry the ALQ-99 tactical jamming system, the ALQ-218 wideband receiver, and the AN/ALQ-240 electronic support measures suite in a configuration that makes it simultaneously the most capable airborne electronic warfare platform in the U.S. inventory and the aircraft that the Houthi C-2 radar node, 48 nautical miles to the west, had been broadcasting its location to for the past 19 minutes without knowing it. The pilot occupies the front seat. The electronic warfare officer occupies the rear seat with the demeanor of a person who has found what they were looking for and is now doing mathematics. The wingman is an F/A-18F Super Hornet, 2-seat, carrying 2 GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions, 2,000-pound GPS-guided munitions that carry the specific conviction of a weapon that does not negotiate about where it arrives. The F/A-18F is not the specialist tonight. It is the delivery mechanism for a conclusion that the EA-18G's rear seat has been building since 1928, when the Houthi AN/TPS-37 derivative radar node, a Chinese-manufactured fire control and surveillance radar system that the Houthis have been operating in the western Yemeni coastal highlands for 14 months under a designation that the Carrier Air Wing's targeting cell has been tracking since the first day of its mission, turned on and began painting the Red Sea. It painted exactly the wrong thing. The AN/TPS-37 derivative that the Houthi Air Defense Network operates is, by the standards of modern air defense radar systems, a credible piece of equipment in the specific sense that credible means capable of detecting and tracking aircraft and providing targeting data to surface-to-air missile systems and anti-ship missile batteries with sufficient accuracy to constitute a genuine operational concern. It is Chinese manufactured, transferred through procurement channels that several UN panel reports have documented with increasing specificity, and that the sanctions enforcement community has been addressing with the persistence of organizations that deal with problems that do not resolve quickly. It operates in C-band. It has a detection range against fighter-sized targets of approximately 200 kilometers. It has been the primary sensor for 3 Houthi anti-ship missile engagements in the Red Sea, 2 of which succeeded in acquiring a contact, and 1 of which succeeded in providing targeting data that caused a missile to miss a container vessel by approximately 4 nautical miles, which is either a near miss or a failure, depending on which side of the engagement you are assessing from. It also, when operating in C-band at the power levels required to paint the Red Sea at 200 kilometers range, emits a signal that the EA-18G's ALQ-218 wideband receiver detects, classifies, and begins building a technical profile from approximately 240 nautical miles away. The radar had been on for 19 minutes. The ALQ-218 had been collecting for 19 minutes. The technical profile was not complete. It was, at 19 minutes, considerably more complete than it had been at 0 minutes, and the electronic warfare officer, in the EA-18G's rear seat, had already transmitted the first segment of the collection package to the carrier and to Fifth Fleet via the data link that the aircraft maintains throughout its sortie. At 1951, the EA-18G's navigation computer updated the mission timeline. 48 nautical miles to the target, 4 minutes and 30 seconds to the jamming bracket. The electronic warfare officer looked at the fuel state. This is the moment the story requires attention. The EA-18G had been airborne since 1730. 2 hours and 21 minutes. The ALQ-99 jamming pods, running in support of a previous tasking earlier in the sortie. A strike package escort that had taken the aircraft farther south than the original mission plan had specified. Because Houthi air defense activities south of the intended route had required the Growler to extend its jamming coverage, had been running at higher power levels than the original fuel planning assumed. The ALQ-99 is powered by the aircraft's own electrical system, and electrical loads affect fuel burn, and fuel burn over 2 hours and 21 minutes at higher than planned ALQ-99 power had produced a fuel state that the pilot was now looking at with the specific expression of a pilot who has been doing mental arithmetic and has arrived at an answer they wish were different. The fuel state was not bingo. Bingo was the threshold below which returning to the carrier became the only acceptable option regardless of mission status. The fuel state was approximately 6 minutes above bingo at current consumption rate, with the ALQ-99 at the power setting the mission required. 6 minutes. The mission's jamming bracket and the target's destruction would take, under the plan, approximately 11 minutes from jamming initiation to weapons impact. 11 minutes required, 6 minutes of margin above bingo. The math produced a number that was 5 minutes short of comfortable. The pilot called it to the electronic warfare officer. The electronic warfare officer called it to the strike lead in the F/A-18F behind them. The strike lead called it to the carrier's strike operations center via the secure data link in the 5 seconds it takes a professional to describe a fuel state in the vocabulary that strike operations uses. Strike operations had a decision to make in approximately 90 seconds. The target had been emitting for 23 minutes. The intelligence value of continued emission was accruing. The operational window for the strike, before the radar operator in the target site did whatever radar operators do when they get nervous, which is turn off the radar, at which point the target becomes a hole in the ground with no emission signature and a GPS coordinate that the targeting cell has been refining for 14 months, but that the strike package's ROE required to be confirmed by active emission within the past 48 hours was finite. The fuel state was 5 minutes short of comfortable. Anvil, strike ops. Confirm fuel state and request mission continuation. Strike ops, Anvil. Fuel state is amber minus. We have approximately 11 minutes to complete and recover to tank. Tanker is available at Angels 15, 23 miles southeast. A tanker. The KA-6D tanker that the carrier had positioned as part of the strike support package for exactly this contingency was at 15,000 feet, 23 miles southeast, with fuel. If the EA-18G could complete the jamming bracket, the FA-18F could deliver the munitions, and both aircraft could reach the tanker before the fuel state reached bingo, the mission could be completed. The margin was not comfortable. The margin was, in the specific vocabulary of carrier strike operations, workable. There is a difference. Anvil, strike ops. Mission is a go. Tanker is yours on egress. Confirmed target is still active. Strike ops, confirm. Target is radiating. ALQ-218 has solid lock. We are 2 minutes to jamming bracket. Short sentences, because 2 minutes and a fuel state, 5 minutes short of comfortable, are exactly the conditions under which short sentences are appropriate. 1953. The EA-18G reached the jamming bracket, the optimal geometric position relative to the target from which the ALQ-99's jamming beam could be focused on the radar's operating frequency with the power density required to suppress its output. The jamming bracket is not directly overhead the target. It is offset at an angle and altitude calculated by the electronic warfare officer from the target's emission characteristics and the ALQ-99's jamming beam geometry. The bracket for this target, this frequency, this power level, was at 28,000 feet, 29 nautical miles northeast of the radar site. The EA-18G was there. Jamming initiated, the electronic warfare officer said. It was not the kind of statement that required elaboration. What jamming means in this context is that the ALQ-99's jamming beam focused on the C-band frequency that the TPS-37 derivative was using at a power level calculated to exceed the radar's receiver threshold by a margin that ensures the operator sees noise rather than contacts, was now entering the radar's antenna. The radar operator at the site was, at 1953, looking at a display that had shifted from a clear tactical picture to a display showing what electronic jamming looks like when it is applied correctly, which is a display showing approximately nothing useful. He would not know whether the display was showing nothing because the jamming was effective or because his radar had developed a fault. He would know that the display was showing nothing useful, and he would be doing what radar operators do in that situation, which is running diagnostics, calling his supervisor, and, if the nothing persisted, considering whether to shut down and relocate. The EA-18G's ALQ-218 was watching what happened to the radar's emission during the jamming evolution. This is the intelligence component of the jamming operation that does not appear in the targeting brief, but that the electronic warfare officer understood was the secondary product of the next several minutes. When a radar is jammed, its operator frequently responds by adjusting the radar's operating parameters, changing frequency, changing power, changing scan mode, in an attempt to regain its picture. Each adjustment is a data point. Each adjustment tells the electronic warfare officer something about the radar's frequency agility range, its power adjustment capability, its operator's response to jamming. If the operator was trained on this system, his response would follow a pattern. If the pattern was new, it would update the behavioral profile. If the pattern was consistent with previous collections, it would confirm the existing profile. Either way, the ALQ-218 was recording everything. At 1955, the radar's emission changed. Not off, changed. The frequency shifted approximately 14 megahertz to the south of the baseline operating frequency. The ALQ-218 captured the shift in approximately 0.2 seconds. The electronic warfare officer adjusted the ALQ-99's jamming beam to the new frequency in approximately 0.8 seconds. Total gap between frequency shift and effective jamming reacquisition, 1 second. The radar operator at the site had 1 second of unjammed picture, which was not enough to do anything useful with. Frequency hop, 14 megahertz south, jammer reacquired. The electronic warfare officer's voice was the voice of a person for whom 1 second is a long time and who is therefore noting it as an event rather than reporting it with any urgency. The frequency hop was in the collection log. The hop distance, the timing, the operator's response delay, all of it. The radar's frequency agility range had just been measured. The operator's training level had been assessed from the speed of his response. Both were now in the technical profile that the ALQ-218 was building and transmitting in real time. 1957. The F/A-18F was at optimal release altitude, 22,000 feet, 41 nautical miles from the target. The GBU-31's GPS guidance had been updated with the target coordinates that the EA-18G's geolocation system had been refining since 1928. 29 minutes of emission from the radar had produced a target position accurate to approximately 4 meters. 4 meters. The GBU-31's circular error probable is 5 to 8 meters. The math was in the weapon's favor. Anvil 2, weapons release in 30 seconds. The strike pilot ran his final checklist with the speed of a person who has done this before, and for whom the checklist is not a burden, but a structure that ensures the 30 seconds produce the intended result. GBU-31 guidance mode confirmed. Target coordinates verified. Release circuit armed. At 19:57 and 32 seconds, the first GBU-31 departed the F/A-18F's port station. 4 seconds later, the second departed the starboard station. Both weapons fell through 22,000 feet of October night over the Red Sea, guided by the GPS signal that the radar site had been helpfully providing a geolocation reference point for during the preceding 29 minutes. The weapons do not know this. The weapons know their coordinates and the inertial reference that keeps them honest on the way there. The electronic warfare officer in the EA-18G watched the target's emission throughout the weapon's time of flight. The radar continued operating through the jamming, its operator making one additional frequency adjustment at 2001, 15 megahertz north of the original frequency, which the ALQ-218 captured and the ALQ-99 reacquired in 0.7 seconds. An improvement over the previous 1-second gap that the electronic warfare officer noted in the collection log as a jamming response optimization. The radar continued operating at 2001 and 30 seconds. The radar's emission signature disappeared from the ALQ-218's display at 2001 and 48 seconds. The electronic warfare officer noted the time. He noted the cessation of emission. He noted the absence of any emergency frequency activation in the 2 seconds following cessation, which would have indicated a shift to backup communications. Silence. The target's electronic signature had ended at 2001 and 48 seconds, which was 87 seconds after weapons release from 22,000 feet, which was consistent with the weapon's time of flight to a target at this range and altitude. Anvil, strike ops. BDA request. Strike ops, no emission from target. Time of emission cessation, 2001 plus 48. No backup frequency activation. Target assessed neutralized. Copy. Good work. Proceed to tanker. The EA-18G turned southeast. Tanker bearing 145, 23 miles. The fuel state was 3 minutes above bingo. The 2 minutes spent in the jamming bracket and the 4 minutes of weapons time of flight had consumed exactly what the pilot's arithmetic had predicted they would consume, which is what arithmetic that has been done correctly tends to do. The tanker was where it had been positioned. The transfer took 7 minutes. The fuel state that had been 3 minutes above bingo was, after 7 minutes of transfer, something that the pilot described in his post-flight debrief as more comfortable. Now, the intelligence product from 34 minutes of emission against an EA-18G with a running ALQ-218, the technical profile of the TPS-37 derivative, the Chinese-manufactured radar that 14 months of collection had been building into an increasingly detailed picture, had received, in 34 minutes, the following. Baseline C-band operating frequency confirmed against the existing entry, frequency agility range measured from 2 hops during the jamming evolution, operator response timing documented across 2 jamming reacquisitions, power output measured from the ALQ-218's received signal strength at known range, scan rate confirmed at 12 revolutions per minute, consistent with the surveillance mode entry, and a transition to targeting mode at 2,017 seconds, a 31-second window during which the radar's emission changed from surveillance scanning to the narrower beam of a targeting function, which indicated the operator had a contact and was attempting to develop a fire control solution, which was not going to be successful because the EA-18G's jamming had suppressed his picture. But the targeting mode emission itself was a collection event that produced the targeting mode frequency, power, and beam characteristics that the technical profile had listed as estimated since a 2022 collection at insufficient duration. Estimated, now confirmed. From 31 seconds of targeting mode emission that the operator had engaged while his picture was jammed and his radar was pointed at nothing useful. How complete is the TPS-37 profile now? The electronic warfare officer asked the intelligence officer during the post-flight debrief at 2200 hours. This collection makes it a primary data entry rather than an estimated entry. The frequency agility range from the 2 hops gives us the full operating envelope. The targeting mode data from the 2000 window is the piece we've been missing. Now we know exactly what the targeting emission looks like and can build the jamming response for it specifically, rather than for the surveillance band generally. The operator did us a favor by going to targeting mode. He was trying to get a firing solution while his picture was being jammed. He didn't succeed, but the targeting mode emission succeeded on our behalf. The intelligence officer made a note. It was precise, because precision is what this category of observation requires. The targeting mode jamming parameters would be updated in the next ALQ-99 programming update, which the systems that carry the ALQ-99 would receive before the next strike package that might encounter a TPS-37 derivative in this theater. The next Growler that flies a jamming bracket against this radar type would have a targeting mode jamming parameter that this Growler had provided at 2,017 seconds through 31 seconds of an operator attempting to acquire targets through active jamming. The cost accounting for the evening: 2 GBU-31s, approximately $30,000 combined, the EA-18G sortie, and the F/A-18F sortie combined at carrier aviation operational cost rates approximately $90,000. The KA-6D tanker operational cost $40,000. Total expenditure against a radar site that had been tracking Red Sea shipping for 14 months, approximately $160,000. The radar site's replacement cost, the hardware, the transport, the installation, the crew training, the integration into the Houthi air defense network, is assessed at approximately $2 million and a timeline of 6 to 12 months, dependent on the supply chain that the relevant sanctions enforcement community is professionally committed to complicating. The radar is gone. The crew is dispersed. The network has a hole in it that the backup system will partially fill. And somewhere in the Houthi air defense planning element, someone is deciding whether to turn on the backup radar, which is a different piece of equipment with a different emission signature, and which the carrier air wing's targeting cell does not yet have a complete technical profile for. They will after the first time it emits for 34 minutes. Al Masirah Television, by 2300 local time, had not reported a radar site having been engaged. Al Masirah does not typically report on air defense assets being neutralized, because reporting on air defense assets being neutralized would require acknowledging that the air defense assets were present, and acknowledging that specific assets at specific locations were present would be tactically inconvenient for assets that have not yet been engaged. The broadcast instead described the general operational readiness of the Yemeni armed forces and the ongoing resistance to American aggression. The production values were professional. The narration was committed. The radar site at the Highland position west of the transit lane was not mentioned because the Highland position west of the transit lane was now a location rather than an asset. USS Dwight D. Eisenhower's strike operations log for the period read 1730 to 2215, EA-18G Growler sortie, FA-18F Super Hornet sortie, tasked against TPS-37 derivative radar site. Jamming bracket established 1953. GBU-31 employment 1957. Target emission ceased 2001. Tanker recovery complete 2034. No friendly losses. No damage. 2 GBU-31 expended. A LQ-218 collection package transmitted 5th Fleet 2015. The intelligence annex was 5 pages. The 5th page contained the targeting mode jamming parameter update recommendation. The recommendation was flagged urgent because the next strike package against a TPS-37 derivative site might not have 34 minutes of setup time, and the targeting mode parameters that this strike had produced were more useful before the next engagement than after it. The electronic warfare officer completed his post-flight debrief at 22:15. He had been airborne for 4 hours and 45 minutes. He had jammed a radar, collected its frequency agility envelope, caught its targeting mode emission, and provided the collection data that would update the ALQ-99 programming for every Growler in the air wing. He went to the wardroom. The sandwich situation in the wardroom at 22:15 is not what the wardroom situation is at 1200, but it is what is available, and it is considerably better than the fuel state situation had been at 1951, which is the operational comparison that matters. The backup radar will emit eventually. The targeting cell will be ready. The collection package will start from a better baseline than this one started from, which is how the baseline moves in one direction and does not move back. The Highland position is quiet. The ALQ-99 programming is updated. Bye for now.